We're at BQ Sunday morning, and Jim and I were just chatting about flies and cow shit, and that's a good way to lead into talking about Trump and the fact that David wasn't going to make it, and that was saddening us. And then who pops up on the screen?
Horses.
Hey, there he is. All
David.
right.
You should have heard me screaming at you just a minute ago. Come on, I'm right here.
What
Hey,
do you got to
Jim.
say about flies and cow shit and Trump? Three great flavors that go
It
together.
wouldn't be printable, and we'd all get in a lot of trouble when the Secret Service knocks on my door and says, "You're not allowed to say those things." Can I think them at least?
Hey, you weren't the one
I
that
was
predicted
looking
that he'd be out.
I was looking on YouTube this morning, not YouTube, on Facebook, and there isn't a single person who thinks that the shooting attempt was real. They all think it's, every comment I've seen, they all think it's fake. So I'm waiting to hear what Jim has to say.
Did you
As
read
soon as
Jim's
he
Well,
talks,
post?
again, yeah.
I see the expression on Jim's face. So it's like, have you had coffee yet, Jim?
But my fourth espresso here. Yeah, again, I don't want to be a conspiracy nut, but my God, this guy has. I mean, this guy has a long history of faking attack on himself, and I mean, he's in a. We're walking into an election year where this guy's just going to get. It's going to be a bloodbath. You can see it coming. His agenda is stopped by the courts, and we got Erica Kirk in the audience and Pete Hegseth and then suddenly their gunshots ring out. I'm like, for God's sake, who's writing this fucking Lifetime Channel movie? I swear to God, you know. And again, this is probably some random nut with a gun because it's America. But on the other hand, such is the world that left and right, everyone in America immediately said, "Well, it could be fake. I don't know." you know, I mean, that's literally where we're at here.
So where are you
Still
at,
there?
David?
Oh yeah. For those who are
That
watching, David's at a
expo,
convention.
which
So
was at the, you can see, why
We can see it.
is
It's
that
all.
reversed?
it's
It
gonna be one
shouldn't
of
be.
those podcasts. It's gonna be one of those
Oh,
podcasts.
you hit your
That's
mirror.
what it
Hit that gearbox at the bottom, and unmirror your camera.
Yeah, I have to find that connection here. So
The little gearbox at the bottom.
everybody
The
has their
little gear at
own
the bottom of your screen. Click on
interface.
that. Yeah,
Oh, settings. That's it. Maybe it's under there.
there you go.
Ah, yes.
Yeah,
Virtual background video. Mirror
this is
camera.
where
There we
you.
go.
Did you find it? All right. Yeah, that's where we're at today. I mean, yeah, there you go. Now you're looking normal.
There we go.
Well, that's a stretch.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. What the hell even is normal anymore?
Well, my
God, this is
laptop
this
is
is
5
where
or
we're
6
at.
years.
Yeah, yeah, that'll do it. Well, you're also on a
All right. Now
convention Wi-Fi connection too. So I mean,
Oh yeah, connection.
Well, mostly I
Wi-Fi
logged in so I could hear
connections.
you run, because I know that. Yeah, I know that what you have to say is going to be far
me?
more pertinent and vitriol. Oh yeah, well,
Me?
I don't
When
think
have
he's
I ever
talking
had
to me.
anything? When have I ever had anything to say about Trump? I mean, well, come on.
and Jim, let me teach you. It's you clear pearls and you say moi, moi. I,
Yeah, and that's right
there
there.
was. I
As,
won't
as
mention
lousy
your
as my
name.
acting, as lousy as my acting
I
was
won't
right
mention
there,
your name.
it's
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
a woman in a fandom many, many years ago. I said, people are calling you the Miss Piggy of science fiction. And she goes, moi? I said, all right, yep, okay.
What? Right. Again, though, as lousy as my acting is, it's still order of magnitude better than whatever the hell that was last night. I mean, I will say this: of all the pictures that I have looked at this morning of this attempted assassination, the best one has got to be Stephen Miller clutching his wife's boob as he's pushing her ahead of him. Cover me, baby! I got, I'm important. He's shoving his
That's
pregnant
that
wife
scene
ahead of
from
him to cover him from the shooter. Jesus, what a bunch of
That's like that
scumbags
scene
these
from that
people.
old movie. What was it? The Death Game, where the guy is holding up the baby to protect himself from
Right,
the
right.
shooter.
Yeah, Miller. Apparently, Miller couldn't find a baby to hold in front of him. What a bunch of freaking scumbags these people are. It's
Well, she was pregnant, wasn't she?
astounding
That
to me.
sort of counts. Yeah.
I don't know. And again, I, I- you know, this morning, of course, the first thing that Trump does is post his bit about this is why I need to, a $300 million military approved bomb proof bunker and ballroom. And I'm thinking, you know what? We could save a hell of a lot of money here if we just replace the East Wing with a classroom, standard elementary school classroom, like every kid in this country gets. That's what Trump should get. He should get the same protection from random gun violence that our children get. That's what we should just put a little elementary school classroom at the end of the East Wing, and whenever there's another active shooter, the Secret Service can herd him down there and stuff him under a desk, and he gets the same protection that these assholes have given our children. That
Oh
seems
no,
fair to me.
Jim. Secret Service should wait outside and wander around looking in the
There's that,
windows.
yeah. There's that. Decide whether they're going to go in or not. I don't know, man. I tell you, this is the world we live in, where the president,
But
builds himself a
the
three
thing
hundred
is,
million dollar bunker. Go ahead.
they rethought presidential security after Kennedy, after the shooting at on Jerry Ford, after Bobby Kennedy, after Ronald Reagan. They rethought president, and there hasn't been an attempt on a president, and there were more violence attacks, letters, angry letters sent to the White House when Barack Obama was president, like 300% more. But security was tight. There were no active shootings in the presence of a president since Reagan. And you're telling me that Donald Trump has been so unprotected that active shooters can get close enough to put a bullet near his ear, but not quite, only to kill the guy
Right.
behind him, right? And he
Right.
slaps
Yeah.
that was staged. And this other thing, if you tell me that, how did the guy get into what should have been the most heavily guarded room in America? How did the guy get in? Don't tell me that. Oh well, he just wandered in. He was a hotel guest. Well, and by the way,
I
you
don't.
notice he was black.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, at this point, I don't believe any of the shit that I'm seeing on television. And again, I don't want to be some conspiracy nut here. I mean, I'm skeptic. But the problem is, though, is that we now live in a world where with half the shit that you're seeing is generated by AI, and half of it is an actual, or is active measures by both our enemies and political operatives in the United States. And we got a government that believes in conspiracy theories and patently unreal things. There's a point where you stop believing everything, where you become trapped in a loop of endless skepticism. And again, at this point, I don't know that you can trust
We
anything
all have
anymore.
our own credibility rating.
Yeah.
We all have our own
It's a,
credibility rating, and I think
oh yeah.
that's the thing is we should be able to have a credibility rating that's posted. Like, I would say Jim Wright has a 99% credibility rating, except when he talks about his grandson.
Right,
But
right.
and same thing for me, Brown. Is that
Yeah,
and Donald
yeah,
Trump has
exactly.
a 0.3.
Right, right. Maybe there's a color scale on the bottom of the screen or something. I don't know at this point. Like I said, I like I said though, the just fishing through, and certainly not scientific in any fashion, but just looking through social media, and I'm looking through both True Social and I'm looking through Twitter, which is a cesspool of. I don't even know what Twitter is. I don't even know if it's right. I don't even know if you can even call it right wing anymore. But and then Threads and Facebook and various places, and the
Well,
general consensus
I think they
to a high
identified
degree is
that Twitter and Facebook and a couple of others have been invaded by 10,000 or 100,000 foreign commenters that you can't trust. You're going to get overwhelmed by the bots.
right. And that's the thing, though, is the fact that the problem with that too is, I mean, it's twofold. The bots, that the narrative that's driven, it, both the, the bots would not be successful. The narrative that they push would not be successful if you did not have actual meat humans pushing the same nonsense. If you didn't have people that believe this kind of horse
Creating the
shit,
bots.
it's
Yeah. It's the people
it's a
who are
reinforcing
creating
feedback
the
loop.
bots.
Yeah. The bots. I don't know if the bots originate the memes or if they're originated by. I mean, I see all kind of people on here who believe in chemtrails and I don't know, Bigfoot and so a lot of times I see the bots echo those ideas and amplify them, but and so it's hard to tell a lot of times where some of these things originate at, whether they originate with people, whether they originate with malicious actors. What happens though is it becomes this self-reinforcing environment, this belief system that even when you're presented with facts, you can't change it. And this is not a new event. It's increased dramatically with the advent of social media, where everybody's a star of their own show. But these kind of problems have been around since but the Kennedy assassination is a perfect example of. I mean, no matter there's no proof, there's no evidence that can be presented nowadays that I mean people all have their opinion of whether there was a second shooter on the grassy knoll, whether you know uh, whether the assassination was the CIA or the Soviets or some random and again those things are entrenched in the public mind and depending on which brain you're plugged into, those are things that it doesn't matter what the proof is, they continue to believe. I mean, you can see. I mean, I can see certain things that are definitely pushed by our adversaries to sow division, to increase trust and doubt. Recently, with the Artemis mission, there's not that many flat earthers and moon landing deniers. I mean, there's plenty of them, but there's not that many. But the social media would have you believe that 90% of America doesn't believe in the moon landings and that the Earth is flat, and that's simply not true. But you see social media, which so often shapes public consciousness nowadays, saturated with those ideas. And so when you get events like what happened last
That's how
night,
we got Trump.
the public, right? Well, the problem is within a few minutes, the basic memes, the basic ideology of how we view that event and how we will continue to view that event, even when more data becomes available, has already been formed. And no matter what evidence is presented, and again, when I say evidence, that's problematic nowadays too, because it's not a lot of times that evidence is filtered through people like Cash Patel. And the problem is that 90% of what that
He's sober when he said anything.
bullshit, right, right. But I mean, this guy may, the FBI crime lab may produce ground truth eventually, but there's no way in hell that any of us would believe it coming from this drunken bum who spends 90% of his time in, spewing Trump reinforcing bullshit. When he's not sitting at the end of the bar down and Jack out of the bottle. And so, again, even when you are presented with verified evidence, nowadays you can't trust it. We are rapidly becoming a society that cannot trust the the reality of our society around us. And I don't think that society can survive that for any great length of time. Um, there's a difference between skepticism and and ideological dogmatic disbelief, and that's really where we're approaching some kind of critical threshold of people that literally the problem is that you can't not believe one thing. What happens is it begins to spread to your entire worldview, where not only do you not believe anything the president says, you begin to not believe in the republic. You begin to not believe in democracy. You begin to not believe in the in society and helping each other, And so, yeah, the structure of society itself, of civilization, begins to fall apart
What was that? World's one.
when everyone doubts everyone else. That's literally where you're at. So we're going to fall apart. I see David's talking to he's got somebody at his table, I think, right? You get somebody there.
Yeah, we
Sign
just
an
sold a
autograph.
book. We sold a book.
Outstanding.
It's a good
Always my
one. It was
favorite.
my book I'm reading. That's very important. That we should only get better
I have
writers
that
in the
book.
world.
That's right. I have
So,
I have a signed version of that book.
yeah, and
I
I
don't
have been
remember
very
I don't remember who signed it. It wasn't
kind.
you, but
I want you to get back to work on that novel you started. It was a brilliant start, and I want to know what happens next.
yeah, I got a bunch of stuff queued up. It's just that life has kind of overtaken us this year, and so the last year and a
I mean,
half. So
and I don't
my
begrudge you
mother
those
passed
great
away,
bird
and
pictures. You take those
yeah,
great pictures.
my mother passed away earlier this year, and so suddenly, and I'm the trustee, the estate trustee, and so estate makes it sound like it's right, like it's not some like it's not what was left of the farmhouse in Michigan. But now I finally got to the point where hopefully the last piece of this will be done tomorrow. Tomorrow's the last. That should
Oh,
be the
good.
last legal step that I have to go through. But
Remember what John Lennon said.
dying, man, I tell you, dying is a complex process in the
John
United
Lennon,
States of
what
America.
happens
I'll
off
tell you
making
that.
plans.
Yeah, yeah, and it is. Like I said, it's I got to get stuff done. I don't know how much longer I got. Probably not as long as you.
Well,
It's just I'm to
everybody
the
says
point
that. I
now
don't know
where
how much longer I've got to go today.
yeah, I got to make the most of it. I need
So,
to get stuff done, and but the problem, I owe Bob a short story here too. He's gonna yell at me when we're all done here, and but
Yeah, I'm not going to yell at you, not until after June
no,
28th.
I got it.
he's
I
going to
got a
give you
brilliant. In
the
fact,
sad look.
in fact,
Give you
in fact,
the sad look. You're in trouble.
I've got a great short story that now I got to go back and do a little rework after what happened last night. But it's very topical, very sci-fi, very yeah. It's just probably I'm really excited about this one. But yeah, it's um, I'm trying to get all this stuff cleared up. I got to go to. I'm going to be at MissCon again this year, like I usually am, and I'm trying to. And then when my wife and I'll be a month and a half on the road taking pictures like we usually do this summer, and I'm trying to get all this crap cleared up before we get to that threshold. So that's where I'm at here. So if I swear to God, if this asshole would just take a week off for crying out loud, I used to bitch all the time to probably go golfing every weekend. I miss it. I'm like, listen, dude, why don't you just take a week off on the taxpayer time, Heidi ho your ass down to Mar-a-Lago and spend about 5 days just offline, smacking the ball around in the grass. Look, use my tax dollars and just shut the fuck up for a while, will you? God, it's every day. It's every day.
What if
The whole
I'm
country.
gonna
I swear,
I'm
when
gonna
this guy
offer a conspiracy theory. Let me offer a conspiracy theory. It's not Trump who's doing those midnight tweets. It's Stephen Miller.
yeah, and again, I don't know that it matters because whether he's physically typing them with his tiny little thumbs or whether it's Stephen Miller or whether it's what's his nuts there, Stephen Chung or however you say it, whether it's that guy, I don't know that it matters because it's the voice of MAGA. It's the controlling overall. It's It's 1984. It's Big Brother. It's the faceless dude on the wall in 1984. And what amazes me is that no matter how insane this guy is, they eat this. They pick it apart like it's some kind of divine. And you know, again, I'm literally watching members of the press. I'm watching members of the right wing press, though I don't know what the difference is nowadays. And I'm watching members of the administration go on television and talk about Trump's brilliant strategy in Iran. And I'm like, I don't even think we're living in the same reality anymore. I'm looking at abject failure. I mean, I'm watching some dipshit yesterday talking about the fact that Iran used a 40-year-old fighter jet, a U.S. fighter jet, to bomb our base in the Middle East through all of our advanced air defenses is somehow a good thing because it demonstrates, I don't know, I just sat there with my mouth hanging open. There was a point where I just had to stop listening to this guy because it's a cult. It is a cult mentality where they're spinning literally anything this guy does into some kind of divine providence. There's you can't reason people out of that. There's you again. I mean, these are the same. This is the same mentality.
You can't reason them out of a position that they didn't get to by unreason. You can't reason them out of insanity.
Right. This is the same dogmatic fanaticism that you saw in the bunker under Berlin. I mean, the world was closing in. The Nazi armies had been destroyed. There was nothing left. And Hitler is moving little pieces around on a map and his desk in the bunker the day before he offed himself. And the secretaries and the staff are all standing there in amazement at his brilliance and hanging on there expecting him to save them as the Soviet tanks are rolling through the streets 50 feet over their head. And those people, they didn't stop being Nazis after the war was over. They simply learned to keep their mouths shut so they didn't wind up hanged at Nuremberg or put against a wall by partisans but 40, 50 years later when they interviewed some of these people, they still believed. They still believed,
I'm
and
sure you're
it's just
with Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt talked about the banality of evil. People who were thoughtless and banal and not evil geniuses, they were stupid. They were stupid people who wandered into positions of authority and did stupid things. And other people
right.
thought they were geniuses.
Right. Well, again, when you don't have any education and you don't understand how the world works, everything is a conspiracy theory to you. Okay, and so these people, when they hear someone like Stephen Hawking talk or Neil deGrasse Tyson, as problematic as he may be, when they hear these people talk, what they hear is that voice from Charlie Brown's mom on the cartoon, wah 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 wah, because they don't understand any of it. Right? You can't. When Tyson goes on Joe Rogan and he talks about quantum mechanics or he talks about astrophysics, there's nobody in that audience that can understand a word that guy is saying. He might as well be speaking in Chinese. All right, and so that's how they think a smart guy talks. And so when Trump talks, they can't understand anything he says, not because he's speaking fucking gibberish. To them, it sounds the same. They don't understand anything that Neil deGrasse Tyson is saying, and they don't understand anything that Trump is saying. And so to them, it's the same thing. Trump must be smart. You can't understand him. And this is the world that we live in, man. Again, all you had to do was listen to the comments on social media during the Artemis mission, and it's astounding how illiterate and scientifically illiterate most Americans are. You would not have things like the this massive anti-vax movement if Americans had any grasp of basic science whatsoever. If they, when you have someone like RFK who has no medical background whatsoever, no scientific background whatsoever, the guy is one of the most utterly he's not just incompetent and unqualified for the position, he's actively malicious. And so you have a guy that is peddling this garbage to America, and the problem is that a significant fraction of Americans don't have the basic grade school scientific literacy to counter this guy, right? And so again, and they're so programmed to believe authority that they listen to this guy. This is a guy that this is a heroin addict. This is an addict. And don't get me wrong, I mean, people can recover from this and become good people, but RFK is not a recovered addict. He's a dry drunk. And if you've ever dealt with alcoholics, you know what that word means. They may not be drinking, but they're still alcoholics. They still have the same habits, the same way of thinking. They hang out with the same people. And even though they may not be consuming alcohol, they're still engaged in the same activity, the same method of thinking as alcoholism. And this is RFK. He may not be actively putting heroin into his veins anymore, but he's an addict. He's a dry addict. Every day. It's the same kind of defective, damaged thinking. I mean, again, it becomes incredibly depressing because you look at it and you say, my God, how can anyone believe this lunacy? And the answer is, and you might be talking to otherwise ordinary people, and suddenly they say, well, yeah, but he's got a point. And this is 30 years, 40 years or better of a political idea that has profited from destroying scientific advance. I mean, nowadays, again, Trump yesterday fired the entire National Science Committee, fired them all. These are people that are nonpartisan. The board is nonpartisan. They make scientific recommendations for distribution of grants and the direction of scientific endeavor in the United States of America. Trump fired them all yesterday. They're gone. And, and we're replacing these people with RFK. And a lot of Americans don't seem to see a problem with that. And then our competition out there in the world, places like China, are teaching their children mathematics and science and building the largest radio telescope the human race has ever seen and building a space program. And again, there's a point where this kind of defective thinking causes society to collapse, or causes you to fall behind, causes you to be relegated to the superstitious background. And we're literally looking at that happening to us at the moment. And again, what's astounding to me is people that don't. Go ahead.
One of the things that they do in China, and I'm not advocating this, but when they find somebody who is flawed or a company that is committed in immoral practices, they execute the top corporate leaders. And I mean, it's like, that really, there was, they were shipping dog food to America that was killing dogs, and they executed the guy responsible. Now, I really, I can't advocate that, but it worked. I mean, it sent the message to every.
Right. I don't advocate it, but I sure as hell understand it, right? You know what I'm saying?
It worked. It's like, and I mean, it's like, if we would just, there was a theory somebody posted on Facebook, and I'm not advocating it because that's a crime, but they said all we have to do is kill one billionaire and the rest will fall into line.
I saw that.
One
I think what they said
billionaire a
was,
day. We'll never
all we
run out
have
of
to do,
billionaires.
he didn't say kill. He said all we have to do is eat one billionaire, and the rest of them will fall in line.
Well, we
Yeah.
could just try putting a couple of them in jail when they deserve it.
Right. Well, again, this is what I was talking about online yesterday to my own audience. Of we're not we're going to hold this alleged shooter accountable, but not the entire industry and society and ideology that created him in the first place. Again, we're gonna build $300 million
I want
bunker
to
for the
know how he
president.
got into the room. How did
Well,
that get
again,
into the
at
room?
this
This
point,
is supposed to be the most closely guarded room in America.
well, at this point, I don't even care how he got.
This
I
is
mean, he
why I
got in the room
believe it's
because
fake.
we fired all the competent people for one thing, But the for me, it's the ideology of this. Again, it's this guy. If he's legitimate, if it's for real, looked at the president and said the only way to solve this problem is violence. And again, this is chickens coming home to roost because we literally have an entire administration, an ideology, a government, a society that says the only way to solve our problems is violence. We literally just legalized execution by firing squad and electric chair again. Like, what the firing squad? I mean, again, I will tell you, it was a long time ago. I was a believer in the death penalty, and I've come full circle on that. I don't think government should be in the business of killing its citizens. Now, on the other hand, I don't have a whole lot of problem with citizens holding their government accountable. But again, I don't think government should be in the business of killing people, killing its citizens, no matter how terrible they are. And but again, we spend all day, our administration, the people that we elect to run this country, spend all day thinking of ways to kill people, right? Instead of ways to feed people, instead of ways to house people, instead of ways to educate people, instead of ways to make sure that everybody's got health care. I mean, if we put much effort into universal health care and making sure everybody's got 3 meals a day and a place to sleep, maybe we wouldn't have a need for so many goddamn guns. And again, it's this mindset. Again, if you go back, and I was thinking about this again this morning, and I may have mentioned it on this podcast once or twice before, but if you go back and you look at the Cold War, and you go look at the height of the Cold War, literally, if you lived through that time, you remember that not a day went by that you didn't believe that eventually they were just going to drop the bombs on all of us, right? I mean, it's literally the world that we lived in for about 30 years. And in places like Switzerland, and in places that Americans deride as socialist countries, the governments looked at that and said, we have to protect our people. And in places in those countries, in Scandinavian countries, in places like Norway and Sweden, and in Central European countries like Switzerland, they literally went out and built shelters to protect their citizens in every neighborhood. There was a place, I think it was Switzerland, I don't remember exactly. They built a bunker that was big enough to house something like 20,000 people. It didn't work out. It was big road tunnels, and it didn't quite work out. But the government literally looked at that situation and said, how do we protect every citizen? Now, varying degrees of success there. But meanwhile, in America, the land of the free, the government said, how do we protect ourselves? And the citizens are on their own. The bunkers that we built were to protect the president, Congress, military leadership. We built bunkers to put seeds in, to protect farm equipment, right? We built bunkers in deep salt mines to protect movies, like film rolls with Disney and shit on it. What we didn't do was build a single bunker to protect American citizens, not one. And that's the mindset that I'm talking about here. That's the difference between a civilization that gives a damn about its people and one that only takes care of its leadership. And that's where we live now. Last night, allegedly somebody took a crack at the president. And his response this morning isn't, we must protect all Americans from this type of random violence. It's, I need a $300 million bunker for me to hide in so that I don't get killed while all the rest of you sons of bitches stay outside the fence where you belong. There hasn't been one single call by any politician this morning
You know,
to protect American
Jim,
citizens.
Jim,
Go ahead.
the thing you need to know about this tangerine tantrum toddler is that he does not think about other people. And I read a
Yeah.
really brilliant article the other day that said above a certain point of wealth, you are immune to consequences, and Trump is immune to consequences, which is why he can only thinks of himself. And you think about Bezos and Musk
Musk.
and Gates, they're immune to consequences. They
Right.
don't think in terms that they can buy their way out of any situation. So everything is, this is
Right.
what I want, like a 3-year-old.
Right. Well, and again, yeah, you're absolutely 100% correct. And then again, I mean, Musk has had endless failure, but he only gets richer. He fails up. His, you know, I mean, that Cybertruck is a classic example. I mean, they put billions into that thing, and it's an utter disaster. And yet, for him, he didn't lose a penny. Tesla, the
Because of
company
the
that actually
name.
lost money on this, decided to pay him $1 trillion. Right, exactly. Again, you're right. Once you get past a certain point, someone like Trump, this guy's had endless failure, but once he's perceived as rich enough, then the entire world kisses his ass. Everything breaks his way, you know, and nothing ever goes wrong for these people. And again, you
Well,
know, and you can literally see that. You can literally see
the thing
that
with
every day on your television as members of this administration sit on your television telling you, yeah, gas prices are high, but that's a price you should be willing to pay for our agenda. It doesn't really affect us. Look, it's not going to affect you. It's okay. Groceries are higher, gas is higher, you can't afford rent, you can't buy a house, but that's a price that you should be willing to pay. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't
well,
affect. It's
because
temporary.
they don't, they're not feeling the squeeze because they don't. You know, if you're worth $1 billion, you don't feel the squeeze of a $5 raise at the gas pump. It's only
Of course
those
not.
of us who are getting, minimum wage, which is still at $7, right? And some of the
Right.
states have raised it to 15, and that's still not enough. Minimum wage has not kept pace with the cost of living, and the next president elected has to peg the minimum wage to the cost of living.
Right. But again, and you're absolutely correct. And again, though, but it's this mindset that has developed this bizarre Reformation Protestant Dutch Protestant mindset that is so prevalent in America of work sets you free, that sort of goddamn thing. And you literally hear these people say, "Well, minimum wage shouldn't be a living wage." Well, what the hell should it be then? You know, if you go to Europe, if you've ever been to Europe and you stop at a cafe on any street in Europe, the waiters the waiter's 40 years old. That's his job. That's what he does. He's a waiter. He's proud of it. He's good at it. And he shows up with
And he's
starched
been
white
at that
shirt every
restaurant
day.
all his life.
He's probably an owner in that restaurant. He probably owns half of it. And these people, this isn't some peon job that we give to kids and nobody makes a living at it. This is what people do. Nobody has this attitude of your job is worthless. But in America, you have this idea that certain jobs and certain labor is, it's somehow beneath you. All right. And the funny thing is you pull up to a window at McDonald's and you sneer at that shitty person behind the guy. Hey, just give me my bag of burgers. And we look down on these people, and yet those people are busting our ass 12, 14 hours a day. The labor that is inherent in that is physically demanding. It's a process. If they don't do it right, people get poisoned, die. And again, somehow we decide that labor though is not worth anything.
Yeah,
And
the,
but
I
who
get
tells you
so
that?
angry at people who tell me McDonald's is a starter job and therefore isn't entitled to a living wage. It says, if you don't think that dishwasher isn't entitled to a living wage, don't eat at that restaurant. You know?
Well, and again, but again, who told you that? You know, at McDonald's, the guy that told you that was Ray Kroc, the guy that stole McDonald's
Right.
away from the McDonald's brothers and turned it into this multi-billion-dollar empire. And he got rich by not paying people. You know, maybe we should stop
Yeah.
listening to the fucking billionaires. Is what I'm saying. You know, and again, you have people like Jeff Bezos, one of the richest people in the world, a guy that's so rich he can buy a $400 million yacht and make one of the oldest cities in the world dismantle an heirloom bridge so he could sail it to the ocean, right? With his plastic wife, whatever the hell, his fuckbot wife there, all right? Literally telling you that the very people who pack the boxes in his warehouses don't deserve 10 minutes to take a piss. And literally, those same Americans would look at feudal Europe of 200 years ago and sneer at the peasants working for the lord, the barons and the dukes. And you look at that and think, you know, I mean, we parodied it in Monty Python, right? You know, and people slopping shit in the fields. And Americans look at that and say, ha ha, we never be those peasants, right? And yet you are. You you can't tell me that the Amazon model, how an Amazon warehouse works, that you're not a fucking peasant working for a feudal lord. That's exactly who you are. It's the same
There's a story
exact
that
model.
somebody, there's a story that surfaced. Somebody, one of the workers at McDonald's, not McDonald's, at Amazon, one of the workers at Amazon died at his, and they wouldn't let anyone go and help him. They said, just ignore the dead
Dead
body,
on the
keep working.
floor. Right. Listen, man, you're a peasant. I mean, in places like if you ever visit like the Vanderbilt estate, you know, and people look at that beautiful house, it's stained glass, and you can tour the mansion, and it's so wonderful. And what they leave out of that tour are the villages on that property that family owned and that the people worked in, and again they were serfs, right? Never peasants that worked for this family in the big house, and they're the ones that shoveled the horse shit and planted the potatoes and raked the lawns and manicured the goddamn garden, and they owed everything to the people in the big house. And you know, it's no different than a Pullman, Pennsylvania, where everybody worked for Pullman and they got paid in Pullman script and they shopped in the Pullman store and went to literally worshiped in the Pullman church, listening to the Pullman preacher, right? They no life of their own. And Americans have this idea that they're somehow better than those European peasants of years ago. Yet that peasantry nowadays said we're not having any of that bullshit, and they live in countries where they have an equal share and an equal stake in their government, and a lot of them, and they are entitled by right to health care and housing and in 3 meals a day. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'll tell you what, I lived in Europe, and there's a hell of a lot of misconception Americans have about how superior they are to people that are far better off than most of us are. America's a great country if you can
I was
afford it.
in China.
Don't get me wrong. You know, when Americans talk about healthcare, we got the best healthcare system in the world. Yeah, if you're a fucking millionaire, sure. You know, absolutely. But if you're, go ahead.
Let me tell you, I was in China and talking to a factory owner, and he said his biggest problem was he'd get the people from the small towns or from the villages, and they'd work until they had enough to make they'd earn enough to buy their own house back in their small town or village, and they'd go back. And his biggest problem was turnover because people were making enough that they would go back to their small town, they could buy a house.
Right. Yeah, in America, it used to be that way. In
And here,
America,
my wife cannot make enough to be independent. Without me, they'd be in trouble. And I'm trying to, set up enough book sales, and that when I'm gone, they'll still have an income that will allow them to be independent.
right,
That, yeah,
right.
thank
Oh,
you.
again,
$7 minimum
we
wage.
brag about this. Well, yeah, and again, though, again, we brag about. I mean, you hear this all the time. Every election, the American dream. Well, first of all, define that for me because you're full of shit. But we all vaguely know what that means. You get a good job, you buy a house, you have a little family, you get a car, blah blah blah. You live your whole life, you get your retirement, right? A little white picket fence. Apparently. But the thing is that dream is not affordable to
Chicken in every
the
pot.
generation. It's not affordable anymore, and it's not. Yeah, there's no. You can't afford that, and again, what people forget is that prior to the Second World War, there was no middle class in this country. It was feudal lords and peasants, and that's how it worked. You lived in the city and you rented an apartment or you rented a house from some landlord and you worked in a factory and you worked there 14 hours a goddamn day in heavy metals and in toxic dust and smoke and in poorly lit factories. That's why all those old factories have all those glass windows. They didn't have electrical lights. The company wasn't going to spend money on that kind of thing. I worked in one of those factories before I joined the military. It's one of the reasons I left the Midwest. I worked for American Seating, which was a division of General Motors. My car seats, and the factory itself was built 70 years ago, and it was a toxic stew. And I knew people that had worked there. There were third generation people that worked there, that worked on the same goddamn machine that their grandfathers did, right? But prior to the Second World War, people would live in housing that was owned by the company owners or owned by landlords. And the place where I live, Grand Rapids, Michigan, you can still see how that stuff is laid out. And it was only after the Second World War that the suburbs were created, that the middle class arose, and that wages and jobs became such that this American dream, which only existed for maybe one or two generations, was in existence. And rich people have never forgotten how it was prior to the Second World War, and they've done everything they can for the last 70 years to put it back that way. To why to buy now down here where I live, they're building. I live in this dinky little southern town. David's been here. They're building 2,000. Some development companies building 2,000 houses across the road down the road here. 2,000 houses on 8-acre lots. I mean, you can't even get a lawnmower between these houses. They're all cheap shit houses. They're the last 20 years before the termites eat them. And they're not affordable to people. These are $500,000 places where people are not buying those houses. An equity company is buying those houses, and they're going to rent them to people who can't afford to buy their own goddamn house. And again, you're back to that same peasant feudal lord mindset prior to World War II. That's where we're at. The factories own all the jobs. The stockholders get all the profits. The company owns your house. And this is literally the direction that you're going. And when you bring this up, Trump and his rich billionaire cronies stand on television and laugh at you about the myth of affordability. Trump literally calls affordability a hoax to your
Well,
face.
I tell you what, Jim, I like what you're saying. And I remember back one of my favorite movies, It's a Wonderful Life, where Mr.
Yeah.
Potter is getting a lecture, over the fact that this little savings and loan guy, he says, why does a man have to work his whole life to buy a house in your system when he should be able to buy his house now? And the guy,
Right.
Mr. Potter's agent says, one of these days, guys, we're going to be all working for people like that. And that's why the people like Potter were so forcefully wanting to put anybody who made it possible for people to actually live the American dream out of business and ruin them. because
Right.
their power came from not allowing anybody else to achieve what they have.
Right.
But anyway,
You know,
I just
right, and that's absolutely true. I mean, that's where those movies came from. That's where, I mean, we don't encourage kids to read anymore. We're closing the libraries. We're outlawing the books. But books like The Grapes of Wrath, movies like It's a Wonderful Life,
oh my God,
those
yeah.
stories were about that time. All right. Woody Guthrie, Arlo Guthrie's father. These were literally the songs that they sang, the songs of the Dust Bowl, the songs of company towns, and there was an entire generation that was buried in that. And after the Second World War, had the opportunity to change it and did so. And now,
Yeah, you look at what's in your movie theater and what's on your television now is Marvel superheroes, which is not about the average person. It's like you have to be a superhero to defeat the supervillain. Well, that's great, but tell me a story about a guy who is building a house to live in for his family, or is taking care of his kids, or is building a library or a school, or doing something that makes a difference for ordinary people. Those stories aren't being told anymore. Because we're
Well,
missing
every
the edge of our entire
we're not telling those. Right, we're not telling those stories. Nobody's telling those stories. And again, you brought up one of my personal pet peeves in comic book in modern comics in genre. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge comic book fan. But in the
I
Marvel
tell you,
universe, for example, hang on a minute. In the Marvel and the DC universe, the heroes are billionaires who decide to use their money to become personal vigilantes, or they're aliens with superpowers or mutants with superpowers, but they're not ordinary people. Well, maybe Hawkeye, maybe his bow and
and
arrow. But
they're
again,
losing their ordinary people. Now it's all
right.
super
Well,
families.
yeah,
There's no
right,
longer Jimmy Old Harry White. There's no
right,
longer Alfred the Butler. There's
right.
no longer ordinary people are being written out and replaced by super families.
By right, exactly, by billionaires, by people with gifts that are superior to you, and this is the narrative that we see nowadays. You know, you used to tell people anybody can be the president. I'm not sure that was a good idea.
Well, we know
But
it's
nowadays we
true.
don't say that. Nowadays we don't tell our kids that. We don't say anybody can. You have to be a billionaire to be a president. You have to be rich. You have to be connected. If you want to go to the Naval Academy or the Air Force Academy or West Point, you have to be a member of some connected family to get a recommendation. If you're Joe Shit the Ragman, if you're an average kid off the street, you ain't getting that appointment. And I don't care how good an athlete you are, I don't care how good student you are, you're not getting it. That's how it is. But again, in America, we're becoming very again. CEOs make thousands of times what their best paid employees make, and we look at this and we think, well, this is normal. We literally have people on television telling us every day, billionaires on television telling you that if you want health care, work hard and you can afford it, right? And none of that's fucking true. But you literally have people. I am surrounded daily. I'm related to people. I'm surrounded by people. I live in a town where children's teeth are rotting out of their mouths because their parents don't have dental insurance. Did I say mouths? Wow, out of their mouths, because their parents don't have access to dental. They simply don't. And these kids are 12, 13, 14, and they eat sugary cereal in the morning because that's what their poor parents can afford. They don't have dental insurance, don't have health care. And this is the life that they can expect. You can't dig out of that kind of poverty. All right. I don't care how hard you work. When every job pays less than it costs to live, you can't dig out of that. I mean, and if you do, you're a one in a million story. Um, it, it, there's no way up for the
now,
average American, and it's increasingly so. And for some reason, we feel that this is just and correct. This is the correct natural order of being. Well, who told you that? The guy in
Jim,
the
I
three
tell you,
thousand dollar Armani suit on television told you that.
you mentioned a book earlier,
Grapes of Wrath.
Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever read a book that more accurately would make a person understand what lies ahead for us under this government, under our current government. No safety net.
This is how this States of America was for 60% of its existence was Grapes of Wrath. We idolize that nowadays. It's idealized. It's we look back on it with nostalgia, riding the rails, looking for a job, the hobo life, the people living on the farm, the Dust Bowl. And the reality of that is that it was a short, brutal, terrible existence. I
Well,
mean, when they
Jim,
built,
go ahead.
good, when they built the Hoover Dam, 30,000 men showed up looking for those jobs. It was 110-degree heat along that river. They lived in tents. They brought their families and their children, and they lived in tents and hovels that they put together out of junk along that river to have that job where they risk their lives every day with no health care, no schools, no roads, not even a real house to live in, to work on that project for the 4 or 5 years that it took to build that dam. And again, we look back, and nowadays you have dude bro podcasters telling you, that's real, man. That's what America really give a shit about, building stuff. And there's nothing ideological about that. People work themselves to death in that horrible, brutal, short existence to get something better for their children. And now we are returning to that very type of world of our own free will. Because
Well,
a bunch
that's
of
why I
people
was.
that own everything told us that's the way it should be.
That's why I was pushing
Well,
back just a
that
little bit.
that guarantees a revolution. It does happen. I mean, the Russian people in 1917, they'd had enough of the Tsar. So, let the oligarchs have their way for a while, and we'll bring back the guillotine. Which,
Well, the problem with that,
I've never been to
and don't get me wrong, I'm all about it.
a
At this point, I'm
guillotine
like,
beheading. Probably
at this at this at this point, I'm with you, David. I mean, at this point, I'm all about the guillotines. But the problem with revolution is that, with very rare exception, the people wind up worse off than they were
what you get
under the
afterwards
old
is
regime, and that's what happened. That's what happened. Life in Tsar's Russia was pretty miserable. I mean, this is a bunch of inbred assholes who kept starting wars with Japan and the countries around them, and they lived in huge palaces on the hill, while the average Russian, scrounged for rutabagas in the mud and the cold, and 90% of Russia didn't have electricity or even indoor plumbing. And then the revolution happened, and again, what we're seeing in the country today is what the Russians saw in Russia in 1903, and that's how you get communism, because the communists show up, or their equivalent, and they tell the people, listen, we get rid of these assholes, and then everybody gets an equal share, right? Each according to his ability, each according to his means. It sounds good, because the shit that we're seeing now with the billionaire oligarchs owning everything, that's what makes that message sound good to the average person. Okay? And whether you call it communism or you call it something else, if you're the other end of the spectrum and you're the fascists who show up in 1930s Germany and you tell the Germans, listen, this is bullshit and it's not your fault, This is this is the Jews, or this is the liberals, or this is the gay people, or whatever the hell the enemy is today, which is exactly what they did. You put us in power and we'll make sure that you get an equal share of everything. And that's how you wind up in that boat. That was Pol Pot's message. That was Marx's message. That was Stalin's message. That was the Confederacy's message. And what happens is after that revolution, after they chop off all the heads, what happens is you get an even worse bunch of assholes than you had to begin with. I mean, that's literally how Saddam Hussein came to power. That's how Muammar Gaddafi came to power. And the people in those countries wound up worse off than they are. And this is what we face now, where you have people actively talking about chopping off heads. I'm not saying I'm not one of those people. But the danger is, of course,
Well, the
that
thing
what comes out the other
it's
side
the
might be
question
even
is
worse.
whether or not we're going to get back to our own constitution, and whether or not we're going to get back to
Right,
people who honor that constitution. If we can get
right,
back to that, we have a chance.
right. Exactly correct. And that's the thing. The guys that founded this country were not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they did foresee the need for change over time, and they did see the need to be able to change government and to evolve government without bloody revolution. And the that is the actual difference between the United States and other systems. And the simple truth of the matter is that the fix that we find ourselves in now is largely because the fundamental foundation of our republic is the voter, is the citizen
Yeah.
who has, since the founding of this country, abdicated their own responsibility. And I just had this conversation with people online yesterday when people were talking about, well, the U.S. military is out committing war crimes. Yeah, that may be a true statement. Don't get me wrong. But those soldiers, you expect a 19-year-old Army private with a high school education and minimal information at the bottom of the chain of command, isolated in a foreign country in a war zone, to be able to tell whether an order is constitutional and legal or not, while at the same time, we don't hold Congress to that same standard. This is the problem with the United States of America. We blame the guy at the bottom all the time and refuse to hold our leaders responsible. And when I say responsible, I mean our side, their side. Your job as a voter, as a citizen of the republic, is first and foremost to hold your fucking government accountable. And if the goddamn people leading your party aren't doing it, you need to throw those bastards out and replace them with people who will. And this is one of the biggest problems that we face right now. I just shouted at Chris Coons this morning for whatever the hell good that will do. He's on social media belaboring the, oh my God, someone took a shot at violence is no place in our democracy. Oh, for fuck's sake. The President of the United States daily threatens violence against the press. ICE carries out those threats. Congress stands by with their thumb in their ass, letting it happen, while the press is willingly complicit because that kind of controversy sells copy and keeps those people in business. This is the whole problem,
I hate to bail
right?
out because this is getting good, but I've done my hour. So
All right.
and
See you
Jim,
later.
the Jim's got at least 2 hours of ranting left. So,
I
so
know my blood pressure's through the ceiling this morning. I need to go get on a bicycle and go
yeah,
ride
me
for an
too.
hour and
Yeah,
urge or
I
something.
got a
I
little
will.
ranting myself going.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you,
will see you
David.
later, Bob. And
And
it is
you,
always good to spend time with you. Good for my blood pressure. I will see you later.
all
See you later,
righty.
David.
Bye
Have a good one. Enjoy the convention, man.
do. Hey, and Jim, there's one thing I wanted to add for um, the, you talked about us glorifying when you talked about the grapes of wrath about riding the
Yeah.
rail. When you read that book, when I read that book just recently, it horrified me because I didn't see the glorification of poverty. I saw the tragedy of poverty. I saw guys showing up to work to find out that their wages were cut today because the bankers who owned the farms had got to who gave loans for seed said, if you don't reduce the pay for these people, we will not give you money next year. I saw, just it is possibly one of the most honest looks at the moneyed elites' desire to crush the spirits of the poor and keep them in their place that I've ever read.
Well, again, you read Grapes of Wrath, and that's what you see because that's who you are, Bob. But again, you if you look at where we are as a society right now, you have a significant fraction of people in this society, men, white men of a certain age, who drive giant militarized trucks. And they don't paint these trucks bright colors, they're painted olive drab, brown, military colors, what they think of as military colors. And the trucks are tricked out to look like military, pseudo military vehicles. And they wear camouflage or Under Armour shirts, and they wear beards that they think SEALs wear every day. And I work with a lot of SEALs, and I never saw one in a beard unless I'd been in the field for 3 weeks. And grooming standards in the military apply to everybody. But again, they want, and I say this as a guy on a podcast wearing a military haircut because I've had this haircut for 40 years and I don't know how to do anything else. But again, I see these guys trying to look like they're in the military because those that really served in war look at war, most of us, not all of us, most of us look at war as a horrifying experience, right? We wake up 30 years later and you can still smell it. And you see things that don't ever leave your head. But some people, and a significant fraction of our population currently, looked at 20 years of war and looked at the fact that we referred to heroes and we gave them parades and days of honor and military discounts. And they didn't have the guts to serve themselves, but they wanted that respect. And so they look at war the way that they look at war. You and I look at war because we're military people and we're horrified. The same way you were reading Grapes of Wrath. But they look at war and they see it as this glorious spectacle, this might makes right. Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, hear the lamentations of their women, that horse shit. And so when someone like Jeff Bezos reads Grapes of Wrath, he sees those bankers as the hero, not the guy riding the rails. And so it's about perspective and it's about how we regard society. And far too many of our society regard those at the bottom end of the spectrum as deserving of their position. The homeless deserve to be homeless. The poor deserve to be poor. Those that are rich were born that way because they're better, they're superior. I mean, this is Trump every day. This is MAGA. This is the ideology of MAGA. This is the phrase, and I'll butcher this one because I don't remember exactly how it goes, but this was Lyndon Johnson who said that if you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the tallest black man, you can pick his pocket with ease. This is I mean, this is so ingrained in our society that even Lyndon Johnson in 1964 could see it. And that was a guy that was quite privileged. And so, again, we see this every day. I mean, I can go out here, this shitty, impoverished southern town that I live in, and these people don't have a pot to piss in, but they think they're better than everybody else on the planet. And again, these are people that don't own a house, will never own a house, that don't have health care. There's children, their teeth are rotting out of their heads. They can't afford groceries, and they're driving an $80,000 coal roller that it costs them more than their rent fill up every week. And the guy they voted for, if they voted, because most of them didn't, they like to say they did, but they didn't actually show up. And the guy that they voted for shits on them every day, and he's their hero. He's their hero because he makes them feel superior to everybody else. This was the message of Nazi Germany. Half the people 90% of the people that were originally part of the Nazi Party joined the Nazi Party because they felt crushed and downtrodden and inferior because of the situation Germany found itself in for losing a war that they started. And the Nazis, that little shithead that was able to give a good speech, that guy with his wispy little hair and his shitty little mustache, he stood up there and told all those people that they were better than everybody else. They believed him and followed him to disaster. You know, they say history doesn't repeat, but it sure as hell does rhyme. And you know, and here we are again. You know, it's the same mindset, it's the same tricks, it's the same bullshit. And so, again, we've come full circle here. It's the same lies, the same flim flam, the same con. And so, when I'm told that someone took a shot at the president last night, what I see is the Reichstag fire. Now, rightly or wrongly, you know, that's what I see. And that's what a lot of Americans see because, you know, and on the other hand, I see a lot of Americans, and it's possible that the pendulum has swung a bit. I was watching an interview with farmers last night, and they were mad that Trump is destroying their livelihood. But what they were really mad about is that he promised to crush the people that they hate, and he's not doing that. He's sticking it to them. But the one thing that was missing from that interview was who you're going to vote for next time. Because the truth of the matter is that no matter how much Trump shits on these people, no matter how many farms they lose, no matter how much he destroys their market, they're still going to vote for him. They're still going to vote for because they've spent 80 years hearing about how the black people on the coast are coming to get their daughters, how the liberal elites and the educated people think they're better than the farmers, and how the people in the cities want everyone to have an abortion and marry a Muslim, and they're absolutely convinced of this because that's where I come from there, and so I know exactly how these people think. And no matter how much Trump shits on them, they're still going to keep voting for that same ideology. And it just kills me every time I see one of these interviews where they interview these people and they're like, well, he destroyed our market. And, you know, we're not getting any subsidies. You know, there's no fertilizer. All of our import, we can't buy GPS chips for our tractors. And it's a litany of woe and misery. And they're like, who are you going to vote for? Well, you know, I mean, you can't vote for a Democrat. You know, there's a point where, as David said, you can't reason people out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. But the people that are telling them that pound that message into their head every day, those people are not affected. The preacher man in the little town that I'm from, that son of a bitch eats 3,000 calories a day, every day. While the farmers that he preaches this message of hate to, they got to tighten their belt, learn how to eat their own goddamn soybeans, or go hungry, right? That guy doesn't go hungry, right? The politicians that they elected and sent to Lansing, that guy doesn't miss a meal every day. And I don't know how you get around that. I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know, because even suffering the pain that they're currently suffering will not change their ideology. They're not mad that Trump is sticking it to them. They're mad that Trump is sticking it to them and not to the people that they hate, that they've been told to hate. You know, again, I live in a town, and I've told you this story I don't know how many times on this show. I live in a town. There's a giant sign downtown. Guy's 85 years old at least. He's got his front yard about trans people. I live in Milton, Florida. How many fucking trans people do you see a day? Because I'm willing to bet the number's zero, right? Or that you know. And I bet this guy's never met a trans person in their entire life that he's aware of. He's never shared a bathroom with a trans person. His daughter's never been in a dressing room or a public restroom with a trans person. No trans person has ever done anything to this guy in any fashion. But it's the most important thing in the world to him. It's so important to this guy that he's got 8-foot high sign in his front yard because he's terrified of trans people. Now, where the hell did he get that message? He got it from Trump. He got it from Ron DeSantis. He got it from the Republican Party in this shit limp dick looking state. And he got it more than anywhere else from the preacher man at the church that he goes to on days like today. And none of those people have ever been impacted by a trans person either. But just like the Jews in Germany, it makes a great enemy to rally people around. You know, I can go on about this all damn day, but I think I'm repeating myself now, so we should probably pull the plug.
Well, you know, Jim, even when you repeat yourself, you're saying wisdom. So I'm going to repeat Jim a little bit here.
Oh God!
Get
God!
off
Don't do
your
that.
goddamned asses and vote. Okay?
Yeah, we wouldn't be in any of this situation if people had put the republic ahead of their ideology. You know, again, this isn't when I talk about I do this all the time. When I talk online and I say the election, people say, "Well, you know, we showed up at the last election. You can't yell at us about that." The last one. What about the one before? The one before that? What about the local one? What about the election for the dog catcher? What about the midterms? When I say election, I'm not talking about this last election. I'm talking about the last 20 elections. Donald Trump didn't happen because of the last election. Donald Trump happened for the last 20 elections. Donald Trump happened because the citizens of a particular state kept electing bitch fucking McConnell. All right? Donald Trump happened because the citizens of another state elected people who passed laws that don't hold gun manufacturers accountable. Donald Trump happened because not enough people showed up to vote for their local mayor or their local politicians. And those people are the ones that send the electors to the Electoral College from your state. So when you yell at me about Hillary Clinton, I have to remind you that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. But the presidency was handed to the president by the Electoral College, was handed to Trump by the Electoral College, because not enough people in your state showed up at the local elections to choose the electors your state would send to that college. We show up in the elections where our votes don't count, and we don't show up in the ones where our votes matter, where there's 300 votes total to pick the town mayor, to pick the county commissioners. And those guys are chosen by 10 votes. The school board, right? What we teach our children. You saw this thing here last month with this school board, the guy that told a 17-year-old girl, "God, you're hot," in front of an entire room, and they put his hands on her. And they still can't throw that guy out. This weird pervert dude. That's what happens when people don't show up to every election. And those are the people who pick the electors who choose your president.
I'll second that, Jim. I spent 12 years on the school board, and I will tell you one thing. There should never be an uncontested school board race.
Right? Never. There should be
There
any
shouldn't.
uncontested races in the country, man. And again, these are things that, again, the problem with us is that we look back at our politics are instantaneous, they're momentary. We don't see any further than the next election or the last one. And yet, all of these things that we face today are the culmination of decades of apathy and neglect and bullheaded selfishness. And again, there's not a day goes by I don't have somebody come at me on social media about Gaza and protest voting and somebody yelled at me, Kamala Harris, she didn't distance herself enough from Joe Biden. For the love of God, dude, and I can't take you seriously. You, I can't take you seriously. I can't. I absolutely can't take your bullshit seriously. Whether or not Harris was in any way a perfect candidate, whatever kind of campaigns he ran or didn't run, the alternative was Donald Trump. I mean, if your choices are Trump and the situation we find ourselves in now, or anything else, I can't take you seriously.
And Donald Trump is a product of the powers that supported him. And if you think the powers that supported and brought us Trump are going to next election suddenly reform themselves and bring us somebody better and different, dream on.
You can see it. You can see it in microcosm with the Trump administration itself. Every time they fire somebody that you think is terrible, Kristi Noem, Phelan, any of these guys, they're replaced with somebody an order of magnitude worse. We fired the Navy secretary, who was a monumental piece of shit, and replaced him with a guy who's afraid that California is being taken over by witches. Okay? I mean, we got rid of Kristi Noem, who was a monster, okay, and replaced her with Mark Wayne Mullet, who's not only a monster, but he's a lumbering dumbass. I mean, the guy's an order of magnitude worse. He's not on TV every day, but the things that he's doing are worse than Noam did. And it's the same thing. You get rid of Trump, you're going to get somebody worse, because that's what powers that be want. They want us all fighting amongst ourselves, and they want us all fighting amongst ourselves so that we don't notice they're picking our pocket, that they're taking our jobs away. I mean, every single thing that Trump ran on, every single thing that he told MAGA, he hasn't made good on, and yet somehow they think they do. I mean, you literally have the Trump administration on your TV right now telling you that groceries are lower today than they were when Trump took office. And you know that's not true. You literally have people on here talking about how gas is lower now than it was under Joe Biden. That is provable bullshit. That's 2 minutes with fucking Google, right? But again, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, it doesn't matter what evidence you show, because nowadays everything is a conspiracy theory. You can't believe anything. And so we are becoming more and more habituated to believing nothing. And that's where we're at.
And that's where
we're becoming a society of vibes. It doesn't matter what the evidence is. It doesn't matter what the proof is. It's how I feel. And I feel like Trump's great and you're all wrong. And that's just how it doesn't matter. He says, this one makes me laugh about this Epstein file bullshit. It's not bullshit. It's horrifying, okay? But it has become bullshit. It doesn't matter. We talk about releasing the Epstein file. You can release the Epstein files, and it would not matter at all what's in there. I don't care what pictures are in there. I don't care what things about Trump, because the people who believe that he raped children, and I'm one of them, will believe that, and the people who don't believe it will never believe it, and it doesn't make any difference what proof you present. There's this fight over the Epstein file, and I think they should be released. I think they absolutely, but you can't trust them. They've been in Trump's. You generally don't put the evidence in the custody of the guy that's being accused. I mean, it's, as a general rule. And yet that's exactly what we did. We gave Trump unfettered and unsupervised access to all of the evidence that would find him guilty. You can't trust anything in those files. It might as well not
Oh,
even
and
exist.
oh,
You know?
I was just going to say, and Jim, and don't forget that his attorney general now has said the laws that are there that says they have to preserve presidential records,
Yep.
which would
Yep.
now they're void. You can throw anything you want to away.
But again, you know, and again, this is the same conversation. People say, "My God, that's illegal." What's legal nowadays? Unless John Rogers and Congress say that it's illegal, it ain't illegal. Trump can do whatever the hell he wants to. I had this conversation with people yesterday, and people are still mad at me about it. They said, you know, these orders that they're giving the military are illegal. No, they're not. They may be immoral, but they're not illegal. The military is obligated to carry out those orders, whether it is bombing a school in Iran or bombing boats at sea. And you can holler all you want about that being illegal, but it's not illegal. It's immoral. It's unethical. It's horrifying. It may eventually be considered a war crime by history, but it's not illegal. And the thing you have to remember is that every order that the Nazis carried out was legal under their law. Bombing these boats at sea without any evidence, that's a legal order. And any sailor that does not carry out those orders will face the consequences of the current administration, of the current legal system under the current president. And while they may be exonerated years down the line, they may not be either. That's a hell of a risk to put a 20-year-old officer in a bind where they carry out those orders and they're war criminals. They don't carry them out. They're guilty of dereliction of duty. At this point, if you're joining the military, I don't know what the hell to tell you, because that's the situation you're going to find yourself in. But the orders themselves are legal. And if you fail to carry those out, the court is not going to find you innocent. Again, people don't see the whole. The John Rogers court gave Trump immunity for presidential actions where he himself sincerely, whatever the hell that word means, believes that the issue is a matter of national security. And if Trump feels those boats are a threat to the United States of America, they don't even have to be carrying drugs. You just say those people are a threat to America, kill them. That's the military's job. It's not the military's job to define who the enemy is. That's the government's job. Now, there is one body that could put a stop to all of this, and that's Congress. That's what the Constitution tells us Congress's job is. And Congress has so far refused to do that. And again, this is a consequence of elections. We elect people either deliberately or through malice of forethought or through negligence and apathy to represent us in Congress. And when you don't show up, or when you throw your vote away in some stupid protest, or when you vote for Matt Gaetz, this is the government that you get. I mean, the last election, you can talk about gerrymandering all you want to, but gerrymandering has no impact on senators, for example, a statewide election. It may have impact on who your representative is, but it sure as hell doesn't have anything to do with who the Supreme Court is. And so, again, all of these things are related. The world's vastly more complicated than who you're mad at today. And so when I say elections have consequences, this is what I mean. All elections. I don't care if the election is for nothing but the town dog catcher, the school board, town mayor, your state offices, because these are the people who will choose the president, but they're also the people that will act as a check on executive power or not. And that's the boat we find ourselves in today. So Anyway, man, we're a half an hour beyond. I am in the middle of a thunderstorm that is growing worse, and I've got cameras set up in blinds that I probably need to go. I need to go address. So I'm going to let you go.
Okay, Jim, thank you so much. And I will remind you, every one of you live in a congressional district. Find out who's running. Call them, talk to them, email them. Figure out who you're going to vote for and then vote. And thank you, Jim, for giving us this day, this time out of your life.